When I look at that thing, I can't do anything.
Okay, we're live.
We're live? Well, goodness gracious, it's Friday, and it's what I call a fraught Friday, and I have reason to say that. I've got a show opening at ACT, which I am so excited about. It's called To Across, and it will be going for the next basically 3 weeks. And I've got two wonderful performers in it. And I think people are going to really enjoy this. Plus, Connor would be very pleased with me. We're live streaming the show so that people don't actually have to attend at the theater, though a limited number will be able to. So anyway, this is kind of an experiment. We're seeing how it works. We've been very careful with masks and everything. And I've also got Friday Live with you all. So my cup runneth over today, I think. Guess what? Newsflash. This is Banned Book Week. And I want to read you a list of some of the books that have been banned over time. And I'm going to show you a couple of copies that, goodness gracious, are on the shelves of Story and Song. Would you believe it? Angela's Ashes by Frank McCourt. I've read it and absolutely loved it. Another one I've read and loved, The Cat in the Hat by Dr. Seuss. And this will come as no surprise to anyone of my generation. The Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Clockwork Orange by Anthony Burgess. And talk about theater. I was in a show about a year and a half ago, and I played multiple roles in it, and it was The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And Mark Haddon's book, which I also did a course on, both the book and the play, just happened to be quite an interesting experience. Sure why this one was banned, but it was. Let's see. Oh, Diary of a Young Girl by Anne Frank. I am passing over many books that are listed, and just to give you an idea of the wide variety, Fun Home, a family tragicomic by Alison Bechdel, which was made into a play. Oh, Go Tell It to the Mountain by James Baldwin. The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. Oh, and this is a surprise. Harry Potter, the series, J.K. Rowling. And I happen to have pulled, or should I more accurately say Mark pulled, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. It has received some stunning reviews. I mean, The Atlantic says an incisive, engrossing perspective of the life of a Black teenage girl. Newsweek says The Hate You Give is a vital look at racism and police violence. Christian Science Monitor, if The Hate You Give makes you uncomfortable, that's because it should. You can find this at Story and Song. Oh, Howl by Alan Ginsberg. Oh, and one of my favorites, Of Mice and Men, John Steinbeck. Another one I liked, you can tell where my tastes lie, Madeline and the Gypsies, Ludwig Bemelmans. What a lovely mind that man had. It was really, his illustrations and his words were really a delight. Oh, and one of my all-time favorites, in fact, at Story and Song, maybe 2 years ago, I did a prolonged, basically month-long reading where I just picked parts of the book to read um, to an audience, a live audience here, To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee. That book is one I have always loved. And just a little sidebar and a little shout out. I want to tell you about something that happened to me. You know, I'm doing this reading series because I appreciate Mark and Donna, Story and Song, and all the staff here. I also am passionately in love with the written word. But my first job out of college as a fourth grade teacher, I love education and I love inspiring people to find the joy in the written word. And Mark happened to send me, because I'm digitally incapable, a comment that appeared on the YouTube. And this was regarding a book that I read, Walking with the Wind, the John L. Lewis autobiography. And I'm giving a shout out to Alexandra Pacheco. Look at what she said. It explains to you in beautiful sentences exactly why I do what I do. And her note reads, I got this as homework, and I hate reading. I get lost quick, but you helped me to get an A. Thank you, sir. Please keep reading books. Oh, Alexandra, when I hear from people like you, you couldn't stop me from reading books, even if you tried. But please don't try. I enjoy it too much. Now, what I'm going to actually read to you today is something that I'll bet not everybody knows. There is one collection of books that are really what I would call collector's editions. Many of them were printed many years ago. They're not, many of them not currently available. You have to buy the quote unquote antique book. And I just happened, because I love comedy, James Thurber, Robert Benchley, all of these people. Throw in a few people with attitude into the mix. And I happened to see this book on the shelf, Of All Things, by Robert C. Benchley. This particular book is a first edition. I really love looking at the artwork that you see. Look at the owl on the book. And this was Henry Holt and Company of New York. This was their logo. The book was actually published in 1921. And there are a number of stories in here. And I was really quite enraptured by the first one. And I'll show you some other things as well. I always mispronounce this name, but Glyas Williams is an illustrator. You'll see his work in the New Yorker. He did cartoons, book illustrations. And anyway, I'll show you this before I get started. Look at that fellow lying out there just as happy as he can with a notebook by his side and a pen or pencil, and he's gazing into some kind of a container. So I'm not quite sure what he's doing, but let's read the book. This is called The Social Life of the Newt. It is not generally known that the newt, although one of the smallest of our North American animals, has an extremely happy home life. It is just one of those facts which never get bruited about. I first became interested in the social phenomena of newt life early in the spring of 1913, shortly after I had finished my researches in sexual differentiation among amoeba. Oh my goodness, maybe this should have been banned. Well, we'll find out. Since that time, I have practically lived among the newts, jotting down observations, making lantern slides, watching them in their work and in their play. And you may rest assured that the little rogues have their play, as who does not? Until, from much lying in a research posture on my stomach over the enclosure in which they were confined, I found myself developing what I feared might be rudimentary creepers. And so, late this autumn, I stood erect, walked into my house, where I immediately set about the compilation of the notes I had made. So much for the non-technical introduction. The remainder of this article bids fair to be fairly scientific. In studying the more intimate phases of newt life, one is chiefly impressed with the methods by means of which the males force their attentions upon the females, with matrimony as an object. For the newt is, after all, only a newt, and has his weaknesses just as any of the rest of us. And I, for one, would not have it different. There is little enough fun in the world as it is. The peculiar thing about a newt's courtship is its restraint. It is carried on at all times with a minimum distance of 50 paces, a newt measure, between the male and the female. Sounds like social distancing to me. That's me, not Benchley. Some of the bolder males may now and then attempt to overstep the bounds of good sportsmanship and crowd in to 45 paces. But such tactics are frowned upon by the Rules Committee. To the eye of an uninitiated observer, the pair might be dancing a few of the more open figures of the minuet. The means employed by the males to draw the attention and win the affection of those of the opposite sex, females, are varied and extremely strategic, until the valuable researches by Strudelhoff in 1887 in his Entwicklungsmechanik, no one has been able to ascertain just what it was the male newt did to make the female see anything in him worth throwing herself away on. It had been observed that the most personally unattractive newt could advance to within 50 paces of a female of his acquaintance, and by some coup d'oeil bring her to the point where she would, in no uncertain terms, indicate her willingness to go through with the marriage ceremony at an early date. It was Strudelhoff who discovered, after watching several thousand courting newts under a magnifying lens, questionable taste on his part, without doubt. But all is fair in pathological love. That the male, during the courting season, the season opens on the 10th of March and extends through the following February, leaving about 10 days for general overhauling and redecorating, gives forth a strange, phosphorescent glow from the center of his highly colored dorsal crest, somewhat similar in effect to the flash of a diamond scarf pin in a red necktie. Now this glow, according to Strudelhoff, so fascinates the female with its air of elegance and indication of wealth that she immediately falls victim to its lure. But the little creature, true to her sex instinct, does not at once give evidence that her morale has been shattered. She affects a coyness and a lack of interest by hitching herself sideways along the bottom of the aquarium, with her head turned over her right shoulder, away from the swaying. Now, a trained ear might even detect her whistling in an indifferent manner. The male, meantime, is flashing his gleamer frantically 2 blocks away and is performing all sorts of attractive feats calculated to bring the lady to terms. I have seen a male, in the stress of his handicapped courtship, stand on his 4 feet, gesticulating in amorous fashion with his hind feet in the air. Now, Franz Ingelholt, in his Über Weltschmerz des Newt, recounts having observed a distinct and deliberate undulation of the body, beginning with the shoulders and ending at the filament of the tail, which might well have been the origin of what is known today in scientific circles as the shimmy. Now, the object seems to be the same, except that in the case of the newt, it is the male who is the active agent. In order to test the power of observation in the male during these maneuvers, I carefully removed the female, for whose benefit he was undulating, and put in her place, in slow succession, another, but less charming female, a paperweight shaped like a newt, and finally, a common rubber eraser. From the distance at which the courtship was being carried on, the male, who was, it must be admitted, a bit nearsighted, congenitally, was unable to detect the change in personnel and continued, even in the presence of the rubber eraser, to gyrate and undulate in a most conscientious manner, still under the impression that he was making a conquest. Oh, at last, worn out by his exertions, and disgusted at the meagerness of the reaction on the eraser, he gave a low cry of rage and despair and staggered to a nearby pan containing barley water. from which he proceeded to drink himself into a gross stupor. Thus, little creature, did your romance end. And who shall say that its ending was one whit less tragic than that of Camille? Oh, not I, for one. In fact, the two cases are not at all analogous. And now that we have seen how wonderfully nature works in the fulfillment of her laws, even among her tiniest creatures, let us study for a minute a cross-section of the community life of the newt. It is a life of all kinds of exciting adventure, from weaving nests to crawling about in the sun and catching insect larvae and crustaceans. The newt's day is practically never done, largely because the insect larvae multiply 3 million times as fast as the newt can possibly catch and eat them. And it takes the closest kind of community teamwork in the newt colony to get things anywhere near cleaned up by nightfall. It is early morning, and the workers are just appearing, hurrying to the old log which is to be the scene of their labors. What a scampering! What a bustle! Oh, the little scamperers! Ah, the little bustlers! How lucky you are, and how wise! You work long hours without pay for the sheer love of working. Oh, an ideal existence, I'll tell the scientific world. Over here, on the right of the log, are the master draggers. Of all the newt workers, they are the most futile, which is high praise indeed. Come, let us look closer and see what it is that they are doing. The one in the lead is dragging a bit of gurry out from the water and up over the edge into the sunlight. Following him in single file come the rest of the master draggers. Oh, they are not dragging anything, but are sort of helping the leader by crowding against him and eating little pieces out of the filament of his tail. And now they have reached the top. The leader, by dint of much legwork, has succeeded in dragging his prize to the ridge of the log. The little workers, reaching the goal with their precious freight, are now giving it over to the master pushers, who have been waiting for them in the sun all this while. Now, the master pusher's work is soon accomplished, for it consists simply in pushing the piece of gurry over the side of the log until it falls with a splash into the water, where it is lost. Now, this part of their day's task finished, the tiny toilers rest clustered together in a group, waving their heads about from side to side, as who should say, there, that's done. And so it is done. My little master draggers and my little master pushers. And well done, too. Would that my own work were as clean cut and satisfying. And so it goes, day in and day out. The busy army of newts go on making the world a better place in which to live. They have their little trials and tragedies, it is true, but they also have their fun, as anyone can tell by looking at a log full of sleeping newts on a hot summer day. And after all, what more has life to offer? Well, now, we spent about 15 minutes reading about the social life of the newt. Now, I want to just show you a few of the illustrations in this book. Remember, this is a first edition and really very much a collector's item. Coffee, Meg and Ilk. And underneath, it says, placing both hands on the counter, I emit what promises to be a perfect bellow. Catch that fellow in the middle of a bellow, in the middle of the illustration. This Mr. Williams was a very popular illustrator, and I'll bet some of you who are in my age bracket will remember some of the things he did. I think this one is great fun. I don't know if any of you remember that thing about call for Philip Morris, a cigarette ad. Well, look at that endless hallway and the perspective disappearing, and there are people milling about, and there is a gentleman, obviously, one of the workers of the hotel. And it said that sometimes that was the only name he would call for mile upon mile. And the article of this, the title of this particular story is Call for Mr. Kenworthy. I could only pick one story to read for you, but I wanted to show you some of the others. Now, a story called Christmas Afternoon. Look at that. All these people having collapsed in their chairs, and underneath, and there's a Christmas wreath and garlands over the door. You can tell it's after something else has happened. And the caption, what an afternoon. There are so many delights in this book. Of all things, by Robert C. Benchley. And there is only one copy here at Story and Song. And if you go up the steps, follow your nose, there is a bookshelf. And on that bookshelf are one after the other of these very precious collector's editions of books on any topic you could imagine. And now, I think we're through for Friday. I've got to exit stage left to the theater for the show tonight. And I have so enjoyed this brief time with you this afternoon. And I do look forward to seeing everybody for poetry on Wednesday. Now you have a magnificent weekend.